depends on where you live, and if you are a Republican that's in a suburban area, an area that is filled with professionals who have college degrees or higher, he's a drag. He is very unpopular among this group of voters, probably down in some cases into the high 20s, low 30s. If you live in rural parts of this country, he can still be very popular in places like Montana and West Virginia. He still has approval ratings in the 60s. He will be probably a benefit to you. Fundamentally, a midterm election is a referendum on the president. And when the president is sitting somewhere around 41, 42% nationally, that is a very dangerous number for the Republican Party. It means that he becomes much more of a drag than an asset. So the battle for the Senate is taking place primarily in red states. A lot of them red states that the president carried by more than 19 points. Some of those states he has approval ratings that are still above 50%. But the battle for the House is taking place, really, it's running through suburban America. And those are places where the president is decidedly unpopular. There are also a number of other districts where Democrats have an opportunity, and we'll see whether or not they can win in districts that are overwhelmingly voters of color, who traditionally do not show up in midterm elections at the same rate that they show up and vote in presidential elections. Will this year be different because of President Trump's policies and his posture on a lot of issues, especially on immigration? And can Democrats break through in some of these districts that Trump won, but where some of his policies are no longer as popular, a place like Iowa, where tariffs have taken a toll? By this stage, it's pretty well baked in, and what we're really not sure about is what the turnout looks like and who is actually turning out. So we have a pretty good sense of how people feel about the president. That's not going to change between now and the election. Who's fired up to vote? We think we have a pretty good sense of who they are. We've seen who's shown up in these special elections. We see who's telling pollsters right now who's the most fired up. But we're not going to know for sure until the actual election. And then I'm looking very closely at where independent voters break. In these last few midterm elections, these wave elections, what we found is that the party that wins over independent voters by double digits, usually somewhere in the low to mid-teens. If we see that happening, then we will know that Democrats have very, very good chance to win. So Democrats need 23 seats to take control of the House. They are fishing in a pool of competitive seats. That number's somewhere around 40, maybe a little bit bigger. If you add the seats that are potentially competitive, it can get up to 60. That means that Democrats have a very good opportunity to flip the House because of really all the many, many opportunities they have out there that at the beginning of 2017, we didn't see. We didn't think it was possible. The Senate is a little different of a story. Democrats still mostly on the defensive in some of these red states or states that are moderately red, like Florida, that Trump carried but has gone Democratic in the recent past. The real question in my mind is how many of the seats that Republicans hold end up flipping. Now, a couple of them are in states that are traditionally competitive, Arizona, Nevada, but the other two are in states that we think of as pretty Republican, Tennessee and Texas. And if Democrats can pick up all four of those, then they can afford to lose a good number of their dark red the incumbents who represent dark red states, and still pick up the two seats that they need to take control of the Senate. When all's said and done, though, we really are talking about movement in the Senate, maybe 2 seats, 1 seat. This is not going to be 4, 5, 6 seat change in the Senate. The names are going to change. The control of different states may change. It's a Democrat here replacing a Republican there, a Republican replacing a Democrat here. But fundamentally, we are looking, I think, at 3 different scenarios. A tiny Republican majority, a 50-50 Senate, or a tiny Democratic majority. I think the most important thing to remember about midterm elections are these. Number one, they're very rarely predictive of the next election. So one party can have a great midterm year and then come up short in the next year. The second is to make sure you understand all the different variables that go into these congressional districts. We all want a nice, neat narrative, but sometimes the narrative gets messed up because things happened on election night that you weren't expecting. The other thing to keep an eye on is who are the kinds of candidates running and what do we think they will do as members of Congress. There is going to be a lot of talk after this election about what's going to happen with Democrats, right? What does the Democratic caucus look like? Who are they going to vote for their leader? How are they going to act in Trump's Washington? The most important thing you can do is to understand who these people are, what they're running on, the issues that they're putting forward, the kinds of ads that they're running. Understand who they are before you assume what they're going to do.